Thank you very much. I was fortunate enough to have the session just after lunch, so I hope you stay awake. So my name is Kristofer. I live here in Stockholm, but I work for Microsoft Corporation, so I report directly to Redmond, where all the developers are. I work in a team where we specialize in helping big partners succeed on Azure. My specialty is working with gaming studios, so if there's anyone from you from any kind of game studios out there, I'd love to talk to you later on as well. So my daily work is to help with big games running really well on Azure. So before I begin, how many of you have heard of Microsoft Azure? How many of you know how to pronounce it? I don't either. So I say it like they do in Redmond, so that is Azure. You can say Azure, Azure, anything, that's fine. We understand anyway. So go ahead as long as you say it in any way. So Azure is our computing platform for you, our cloud platform for you to use if you want to. It runs on several data centers around the world. And right now I had to change this slide, I think it was yesterday, because it just took 2 other data centers live in Canada. So we are live on 24 data centers, and I think we have more than 30 that we have disclosed going to be live. So there are data centers building all day long, and we have so many computers coming into those data centers every second, so it's kind of cool. If you ever have the chance to come and see one of those data centers, you should sign up for them. We do take tours, especially here in Europe, to Dublin, so make sure you express your interest if you are interested in going there. Right now in Europe, we have 2 data centers, so that is in West Europe in Amsterdam and North Europe in Dublin, but there's at least 4 that I can talk about coming soon in Europe, and many more coming. So this talk, the idea behind this talk is to tell you about Azure. It's not going to be telling everything about Azure, it's going to tell you something about Azure. And I want you to have seen some of the things that I'm going to show you, so you can go and ask a question. You can look for it later on. This is not going to be, this is how you do exactly, because I don't think there is such an answer. So if you want to build microservices and you want to host them on anywhere, and people will ask you, like, what is the best platform to do that? I don't think there's such an answer. Azure is probably not the best answer for everyone. Google is not either. Amazon is not. And your private data center is probably not either the best. So from time to time, it's going to be different. Anyway, in our data center, we have the infrastructure, of course, and those are a whole lot of computers. And on top of them, we have the infrastructure services that you can use if you want to. So if you want to have full control, if you want to have your computers, your virtual machines, you can have your infrastructure hosted on those. And on top of those, we had other platform services. And it's becoming quite a lot of them right now. So to speak of some of them that I'm not going to speak about today. So for example, up in the right corner there, we say we have a lot of data and analytics services. So we have Hadoop as a service. And that's something that's kind of strange to Microsoft in the Microsoft world. That's actually the Hadoop. It's a Hadoop distribution running in our data center, run by us, but it's nothing special. It is Hadoop. So any kind of tool that you use for Hadoop would work there. So if you want to write a Java job, it would work there. Okay? I'm not going to talk about the data lakes. I'm not going to talk about the stream analytics that do real-time analytics of incoming streams of data, but it's there if you wanted to. What I'm going to talk about instead is the services, and these are the names for these kind of services that we have. I'm going to talk about these services. And these are the services that would be interesting if you are about to build a microservices architecture and you are figuring, would Azure be a good fit for that? These are the services that I think you would be using to host your code. Okay? How many of you do run anything on Azure right now? Some? Yeah. How many of you have full automated deployments of that workload that you're running right now? No one want to really put up your hands. I'm going to show some example how you can get there and how it can be done really good. So, how should I pick what kind of service? I added this slide yesterday because there was an internal thread on the Microsoft ALS that I'm following, and someone said, I have this app. It's written in Xamarin, and I wanted to be able to connect to a couple of tables that I have in a database. What's the correct tool? What's the correct frameworks to use to do that? And how should I host it in Azure? And what would be the answer to that kind of question? There is no such answer. You need to figure out so much more. There are things like, what are the requirements around it? So how fast response do you need? How much money do you have? How much time do you have? Do we have time to build a full microservices architecture around those tables? Or do we just want to expose them? Is that good enough for security? Etc., etc. So there's no such easy answer. You need to have much more information. And I would say that these kind of answers come from experience. So having a really experienced architect in your team is really valuable. And also having experience from these platforms are also really important. I'm pretty sure that you could build anything that you would build on Amazon, on Azure, if you wanted to. And anything that Google has built could also be built on Azure if you wanted to. Or anything that we build could probably be built on-prem if you wanted to. You just need experience on how to do that. Okay? And also, keep asking the right questions. So the right question would not be, what tool should I use to expose my tables to an Xamarin app? The other questions are, how long time do we have? What kind of data is it that we're shuffling from the app to the cloud, etc.? And sometimes the answer to these questions are that your data, your app, should not be in the cloud at all. It might be somewhere else. And it might be in your own data center. And the Microsoft solution to that would be to run what we call Azure Stack. So you can run Azure on your local data center if you wanted to. And you could have the same kind of APIs, the same services, but you would have to have your own servers. But you've heard today that you could put other frameworks on top of our services as well, if you want to. Then there's the choice between infrastructure or platform as a service. So if you want to go full control yourself, if you want to build everything using a hammer and a nail, then you can do that using infrastructure as a service. If you want a service, if you want someone to say, well, here's your database, it's always going to be up, it's going to be up to date with the latest version, then you can have that using platform as a service. We have all these kind of services in Azure. We have, well, not all, but we have plenty of services, and you can choose from many of them, and you can mix them from time to time. Some of the biggest workloads I've been working with are on infrastructure as a server, so running really big multiplayer games on Azure quite often runs on infrastructure as a service. You spin up virtual machines, you have your own kind of control plane, and you control the virtual machines, and you start your, oh, sorry about that. So I should probably have shut down link. So let's do that. That's my colleague from Spain. Where was I? I was talking about, yeah, the big workload. So some of them are just like thousands of virtual machines that you control yourself, and you use APIs to make sure you have them when you want them, and you tear them down whenever you don't need them. The pricing for many clouds, and as for Azure, is that you pay for what you use. So it's really important to have scalability so you want to scale out as in the last minute, and you want to scale down as fast as you can. And all of that could be done using APIs. And I'm going to show you how to do that. But in order to make these decisions, you need to know what you're choosing between. So I'm going to show you some of these features now, and the first one is going to be around virtual machines. So I'm pretty sure every of you have spun up a virtual machine. I'm pretty sure that not everyone has spun up a virtual machine in Azure, and I'm really sure that not so many of you have used what we call ARM templates. So ARM is not the CPU. ARM, that stands for Azure Resource Manager, and the one at Microsoft that decided we should call it ARM should probably be fired, but Microsoft is not really known for its good naming conventions. But ARM templates, anyway, is Azure Resource Manager templates, and they describe whatever you want to deploy, and we deploy it according to that template later on. We have something new that we call virtual machine scale sets, or VM scale sets. Those are for, if you ever want to set up your virtual machines, several of them in the same way. So for example, you have one virtual machine to represent your front-end server, and you want to have thousands of them. You can just say, I want 1,000 of them, and we will scale out to 1,000. And then you say, I want 999, and we will bring down one of them for you. But let's go to a demo. So I'm going to start here. So I want to deploy something to Azure, and I've gone to GitHub. And that's also something that is kind of new for Microsoft. So a lot of our stuff are on GitHub, and a lot of our stuff are open sourced. So this is a repository of ARM templates that you can choose to start from if you want to. You can even put your own templates there and help the community if you have anything that you want to contribute with. And we're going to look at one of these that are called Simple Linux here. Well, I was introduced to say that, is it going to run on Microsoft platform? Well, yes it is, but I'm still going to show you a Linux virtual machine here. If you look inside the file called Azure Deploy, and I'm going to show you in a bigger, hang on. So this is a template. This is how it could look like. And they always start the same way. So you have a schema definition up there, and you have the content version. So the content version needs to match whenever you deploy a template. Then you have the parameters to your template. So these parameters can be reused. These templates can be reused by just providing different parameters. So I'm going to provide admin username, password, and the DNS label, and what kind of a Ubuntu version I want to run here. And then later down here, I'm going to skip some parts, we have all the resources that we want to deploy. So deploying a virtual machine in Azure would mean that you would have to have a storage account, because the storage account will save your virtual hard drives. So you describe your storage account in there. You're also going to need a virtual network. So the virtual network will be used to connect your machine to the world. And you want to have a virtual network card. You can have more than one if you want to, but this time I need one. And you define what kind of IP address should I have to this one. Should it be public or only internal? You can define different subnets, and then you define your virtual machine down there. All of this is documented if you want to dig into this yourself, but I'm going to just use this template as is. A really easy way to deploy anything using these templates are by linking back to the portal. So if I click on this button here, it will bring me back to the Azure portal where I deploy stuff, and it will download the template from, this time from GitHub, and will start asking me questions. What kind of values do you want on the parameters that were specified in the template? But that wouldn't be so fun. But if I wanted to, I could just say I want the admin username to be Kristofer, the password to be something there, and my DNS label something, and then click OK, and that would deploy this virtual machine. But this is about doing it automatically. So we want to do this fully automatic, and perhaps we want to do it like thousands of times, and we don't even want it to happen. We don't know when it's going to happen. So I'm going to do this using the APIs directly. So all the APIs in Azure are REST-based, so you can connect to them any API you want to, using REST, and everything that you see that we do in the portal, in the Azure portal, in the control portal, you can also do using the APIs. I've started Postman. Postman is a plugin for Chrome here that you can use to send REST requests. And the first thing you need to do is authenticate. So before I did this talk, I've gone into my subscription and told Azure that my computer, that this application here, is an authorized application to authenticate against Azure, against my subscription. So when I authenticate, I get back a token here, and I'm going to reuse that token for the rest of the request. Okay? So everything I do here is secured. And as a matter of fact, that authentication was against Azure Active Directory. So if you have any business and you do business with anyone using Office 365, that would be the same kind of authentication mechanism. And by the way, most of my gaming companies don't integrate with Office 365, so it's kind of fun to say that once in a while. So the simple thing here that I could do is just do a get against this URL here, and in the headers I send in the token and also content type JSON. And as a result back, I will get a JSON file showing what kind of subscriptions I do have access to right now. So right now I have access to my internal subscription. And I can then go on and say, I want, for example, list all the resource groups. And this is something that's kind of different to how we at Microsoft do cloud gaming and Google and Amazon does. So everything is centered around resource groups in Azure. So you deploy stuff to your resource groups, and you kind of create virtual containers of resources inside the resource groups. Anything inside a resource group can communicate out to other resource groups, but you can think of it as an easy way to contain any kind of resource that are for that kind of application. And if that application is a single microservice or multiple microservices, that's up to you to choose. So right now I only have one resource group, and it's called GOTO Backup because I've done a backup here. But I could create a new one. So I could just say, so I do a put against the URL up here and say, I want to have a new resource group in the location, and I've already specified some environment variables here inside. So I'm going to have it in West Europe. And I want the resource group to be named, resource group name, sorry. I should have looked that up before here. So the resource group name will be GoTo. So if I do that now, I'm going to provision a new resource group in West Europe. And if I go back to list all resource groups, I will see that I have 2 resource groups. So now I can deploy stuff into that resource group. And one thing that I want to deploy is the template I show you, the Linux virtual machine that was described as a template on GitHub. So I can say, I want to create a template deployment here. And that is against the URL up here. You can see that I'm targeting my resource group. Perhaps you can't see it, but the URL up there is, I'm going to zoom in. So the URL says I'm targeting a specific deployment. I'm going to create a new deployment with this API, and in the body here, let me zoom out again. I'm going to provide parameters to the template that's going to be on GitHub. So it's going to download the template from GitHub, provide the templates, and then provision a virtual machine using them. So just send this one, and back I'll get a result saying that, well, it's on the way, it's ongoing. So if I now go to my portal experience here, and I say, have a look inside the resource group, I would see that I currently have a network interface card deployed. I have a public IP address and a virtual network, and it also says it's deploying right now. So I'm now deploying a new Linux virtual machine that was described using a template. The template is based on GitHub right now, and I deployed it using the REST API. Okay? This seems kind of complicated, but sometimes you need to use the API, and if you want to, it's quite easy to do that. Another way of doing it would definitely be just using the command line. So, will it work on Microsoft? Yes, it does. But the tool I'm going to show you right now it's implemented using Node. So you download it if you have Node on your computer. You download it using npm install globally, and then you say Azure CLI. So that's the command line interface for Azure. I'm not going to install it because I already have. But once you have it installed, you can just say Azure. So everything I did now could be done using the command line here. So if you want to automate it and have it run easily from the command line, you can just use the command line interface. We also have PowerShell commandlets for you that are Windows developers and are used to PowerShell. Okay? So back here. So that was deploying the Linux machine using ARM, Azure Resource Manager, and the templates. But sometimes you want to have stuff on top of your machines, so you don't want to handle virtual machines yourself. You want to use containers, and we've heard several sessions around containers. The virtual machines on Azure support any of the open source container solutions that are out there, so you can have any of them running if you want to. We also have something that we just announced called Azure Container Service, or sometimes abbreviated ACS. So Azure Container Service is a cluster of machines that we manage for you, and you select what kind of open source tools you want on them. So that could be Marathon and DCOS or Docker Swarm right now. You just tell us how many machines do you want, and then we provision them for you. They're ready for you to host your containers on top of. You connect to the cluster using any kind of open source tool or any kind of tooling that you use today, and you provision your containers on them. But we talked about microservices, and I'm not going to dive into exactly what a microservice is because you have total control of that right now. But if you want to host microservices on Azure, there must be a better way. Is there even a right way to do it? Well, as I said, there's no right way. But of course, at Microsoft, we have thought about microservices as well. And to the left, you can see the old approach where you build an app, and you then distributed the app or the layers across several machines. And to the right, you can see the microservices approach, where you build an application composed of several small services, and you deploy the services in your cluster. And those small services could be distributed in any way across the cluster, and you've seen already some tools today that shows how to do that for you automatically. If you want to manage state, traditionally you build stateless servers that scale really well if you want to, and you have the state hosted in a database or something like that behind the scene. But in a microservices approach, it's up to each and every of the microservices to decide for themselves. So some of them might be stateful services, and some of them might be stateless with the database behind the scene. And you want to be able to mix and match that. So traditionally, once again, you have the load balancer, you have some stateless front ends, and you might have some stateless middle tier. And then you connect to queues or you connect to some databases. And in order to scale that layer, you need to have many databases or shards. And you probably add some cache in order to get a responsive service. Another way around would be to instead host the state on the services themselves. So you have stateful services. And inside what we call Service Fabric, we have a new way of building services that uses the actor-based framework style of services. And with the actor-based style, you could build actors, and actors could have states. And you then distribute the actors across the Service Fabric cluster. We will take care of spin up the actors whenever they are needed, and we will also put them to sleep if they don't need it anymore. I usually think of Service Fabric as the revolution when we went from C to Java or anything like that, and we got a garbage collection. So this is similar to that, but you have garbage collection in the data center. So instead of saying, I want to connect to that service on that machine, and then I want to make a change to that specific object, you just tell us, I want to communicate with, for For example, in my scenarios, it's often gamers or game players. So I want to connect to the object that represents player number 2. And I want to change the state from alive to dead. And if you just call into the Service Fabric cluster and say, give me a representation of player number 2 and change the state from alive to dead, and we will take care of that. Service Fabric is available right now. You can run it in Azure as a service if you want to. You can download the binaries yourself and host it on your own cluster if you want to. There's a Linux version coming out soon. There's a private preview, so let me know if you need to access to that. You can build these kind of actor-based services using .NET or Java right now, and more languages are coming. But you can actually host any kind of service on Service Fabrics. So if you just want the pieces of Service Fabric that help you distribute your services across at least 3 or more nodes, then Service Fabric could be for you, even if you have built your services using any other language. We call these 3 kinds of app: reliable services apps, or reliable actor apps, or guest executable apps. So the reliable service app are apps. I heard a question, so what is an app and what is a service? So sometimes we talk about web apps, so we talk about services as apps. So it's not apps running on the phone right now. But if you talk about a reliable service app, that could be a website, that could be a REST endpoint or a REST service. But you could use Service Fabric to distribute and make sure that your app is constantly up and running. You could, if you want to, you could use the reliable collections that we have. And those are right now queues and dictionaries that automatically replicate state across at least 3 different nodes, and make sure you never lose state ever. I would put ever in quotes. And then you have the reliable actors that, as I already talked about, and the guest executable apps are apps that you run no matter what language you have built them on. If you want to go even simpler and automate your deployments and just have somewhere to put your REST endpoint, you don't want to use any kind of containers right now. You're not ready for it, even though I would recommend you to look at it. We have other services, and we have them under an umbrella that we call App Service. So I'm going to show you 2 of them right now, and those are the web apps and Azure Functions. And I know there was a session about AWS Lambdas, and Azure Function is basically the same as that. So let's say you have a web application, and you want to have a fully automated deployment on that to Azure. So how would you go ahead and do that? So what I've done just before we started this session, I just created a super simple Node application. I just told the command line tool that I want a simple Express app that built on Node, and that's everything I have right now here. So if I do npm start, I would start that app on my machine, and I could then browse to localhost port 3000, and that would be my machine, and it responds back with Express. So I'm running a Node application on my machine here. So normally, if this were a normal Microsoft session, you would probably just drag and drop that to the cloud or something, and you forget about everything else. But I don't want to do that, because I know that's not the way you're going to do it. I also know that many people should or are already using build servers. I'm not going to use a build server for this one, but we have integration with them. But what I'm going to do right now is integrate with Git anyway. So everything of this is inside a Git repository locally here. And I've also set up a Git repository up at GitHub. So the next step that I want to do is just push my code up there. So if I go back here and I say add remote, and then I say push to GitHub. So it's been pushed there, and if I update my repository here, we should now see the code up there. Okay? So that's nothing new. That's how you normally do day-to-day work. If I now go into the portal, and now I'm going to deploy this manually, even though I could use ARM, I could use a template for this one. I'm going to say I want to have a website. This could be a web app, but this is going to be a web application with the user interface, but it could be a REST application or anything else. And I want to deploy it to my resource group called GOTO in West Europe. And I want this one to be called node GOTO. And create. And the session before we said that if it ever takes more than a couple of minutes, then it's too long. And this should not take so long at all. So let's see. So we already have a website up and running here. So the website is there. And if I go to that URL, you would see something like a page that says, well, it has been successfully created, but there's nothing there. So what I could do now is I could just tell Azure, I could hook it up with GitHub and say, whenever I deploy something to GitHub, whenever I push something there, it should automatically be deployed to this web app. But I don't want to do that exactly like that, because I want to have some kind of staging environment at least. So what I'm doing now is that I'm going to set up a deployment slot, and I'm going to call this vnext as for version next. So I'm now going to have two slots. So I have two slots that I can deploy to. I have my regular website, but I also have the next version of the website. And it's done. So I can go into that one, and I can now configure that one to fetch my application from GitHub. So I'm going to go down there and say a deployment source for that one would be GitHub. You can see that by default we have built-in support for Visual Studio Online, OneDrive, Git repositories locally, or GitHub, Bitbucket, Dropbox, and some other repositories as well. But I'm going to use GitHub here. And it will ask me what repository do I want to use. So I'm going to say this project is the GOTO node project. Do I want the master branch? Yes, I want that, please. Even though I probably shouldn't, but I'm deploying to the staging environment, so that's fine. And if we give this a couple of seconds more, it should start the deployment from GitHub to this deployment slot. So let's see if something happens. There it is, so it's coming. So first commit. Let's give it a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds more. But basically, it is downloading, and it's also versioning controlling the deployment to the deployment slot. And I'm sorry, I'm even looking at the wrong page here. It's not, it's the vnext. I mistake, yeah, there it is. So now it's deployed to Azure, so it's live now. And you can continue to do that, and whenever I push something to GitHub now, it will then automatically be pushed out to Azure. I'm running out of time here, but I just want to show you that what I could do then is I could just say, if I want to do a swap, I can just say swap the vnext with the production environment, and click OK, and that would swap these environments live without interruption for the service. If anything goes wrong, I can just hit the swap button again. And as I told you before, all of these can be done using APIs, and you can have full auto-scaling if you want to. I'm not going to have time right now to show you the Amazon Lambda, the equal service that we have. That's called Azure Function, but it's there, and it's really easy to integrate with the GitHub as well. So I was going to go with a demo where I integrated it, so whenever someone put a comment in GitHub, I would get some function call here. But let's do that next time. So that was what I wanted to show you, and hopefully I opened your mind that we can run a lot of things on Azure, and everything that you want to run there can be automated if you want to. And please remember to rate the session, and that's about it.
Great.
So,
thank you.
Thank you.
So we've gotten a couple of questions.
Yep.
The first one here is, why would I pick Azure rather than one of the other cloud providers? What is, in your opinion, the main reason to pick Azure?
Yeah, so pricing-wise would be, there's pricing war going on between the three big ones. And so pricing is not like the biggest one. The partnership would probably be one of the most obvious reason. So Microsoft is there. We have offices in almost all countries around the world. We can help you drive your business if you want to. There are some marketplace options that would help incentivize our sellers to sell someone else's solution if we want to. A really big benefit that we have is Office. So if you have any kind of enterprise solution that integrates with Office in any way, and Active Directory as the integration, as the authentication mechanisms would be also some of the really big drivers.
Okay, so one of the things that you showed us was templates, right?
Yep.
The one that you showed us seemed rather long, several screens worth of JSON.
Yep.
Is that just a very complex template, or is there a way to provide sane defaults for these values, or having some sort of inheritance or something like that?
So there's no support for inheritance inside the templates, and that would be quite a simple template, actually.
The one that we saw?
The one we saw is one of the simpler ones. If you want to set up like a full Elasticsearch cluster on several machines, that would be a much longer
So the
script.
size of the template really scales with the complexity of what you're trying to do?
Yes.
So a simple server would be a simple little
Yeah.
JSON file?
But
okay.
there are also very simple solutions. If you want to just deploy a Linux machine, you could do it as a one-liner using the command line tool if you want to.
Okay. So last question here is that you mentioned Azure Functions.
Yep.
What is the defining difference between AWS Lambda and Azure Functions, in your opinion?
I'm not a super expert on Amazon's product here, but our solution is just out there, so it's quite new. So I can't really tell you what the exact differences are.
What languages are supported and that kind of thing?
So we support C#, JavaScript, that is Node. We support Bash. We support PowerShell. We support many languages and many more coming. F# as well. So there's many more coming, and there's currently only a couple of triggers. There's the HTTP trigger. There's the blob trigger. There's like 10 different triggers that you can trigger on right now. But it's the same concept. It's serverless
services. Yeah.
Services, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.